Welcome to the Easier Way to Sell presentation of Close the Deal Without Selling. Here's your host and developer of the Easier Way to Sell, Ike Krieger.
Hey, this is Ike Krieger. Welcome back. I got a couple of emails this week, one specifically from Michael, who said, I'm currently working to install the YES formula as the one and only sales system for me and my business. Music to my ears. Thanks for the note, Michael. The other note I received said, I'm trying to use your system. Remember what Yoda said, do or do not. There is no try. So, he said, I'm trying to use your system, and I'm finding it most uncomfortable when I don't have a chance to give my presentation. Steve, the listener who wrote the note, said, I'd miss giving my demo, I think my demonstration is a really good tool. Plus, it's always been my security blanket. I get it, Steve. It's interesting how your note crossed paths with one of the segments in our last episode of the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast. We talked about the price that's usually paid for success in any new endeavor, and that price is usually a feeling of uncomfortability. And as we discussed in a prior episode, fewer than 5% of people who are involved in any given endeavor are successful at that given endeavor doing what comes comfortably and naturally. If you choose to employ this system regularly, you'll get over whatever is causing your fear. And that's what it is. You're fearful of letting go of what you know in favor of what you don't know. And how do you get past that? Well, you develop a new habit. And let's call that new habit the easier way to sell. And if you follow my coaching, you'll certainly recognize these comments and questions. I get that you're having a challenge dropping an old habit and installing a new one. I empathize. I'm fighting the urge to go off topic for a second. The word empathize, it's a trigger for me. And you always hear about those who have a lack of empathy or someone who's not sympathetic enough in a certain situation. And the word empathy and empathize triggers me to think of what else? A movie. During my undergrad years at Ohio State University, and this was well before The came on the scene, I had a film class and the instructor was critiquing a new film called Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And he was so enamored with the film that he had us take the whole class on a field trip to the theater off campus. It was a great movie. It was great then, and it's great now. In our next class, we discussed the film that we saw, and at one point in the movie, he told us that he had come up with a clear distinction between two similar types of words. He asked us what the difference was between sympathy and empathy, and then he said that the movie we had just seen gave him one of the best examples of the distinction between sympathy and empathy that he ever witnessed. Now, I don't know if you've seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which is really a fun cowboy movie. But there's a scene when one of the gang members wants to fight Butch for leadership of the infamous Hole-in-the-Wall gang. They choose to fight with knives, and Butch says, I can't start until I know the rules. His opponent says there are no rules in a knife fight, at which point Butch kicks the guy as hard as possible right in the crotch. His opponent falls down, and the fight is over. Now comes the instructor's point. When it comes to the man who'd been kicked in the crotch, all the women in the audience felt sympathy. All the men felt empathy. Okay, I'm back, Steve. I get that you're having a challenge dropping an old habit and installing a new one, and I empathize with you. Remember, the best way to predict the future is to invent it, and you now have a choice to invent how your meetings will go. After all, this entire program is about controlling the communication. Intellectually, you know that the easier way to sell is your best shot at sales success, and I'm urging you to create a future in which you know the answer to this question. Who are you being? Who are you choosing to be? Who are you being when you have a meeting with a new prospect? When you sit down across from your prospect, are you communicating from a standpoint of a problem solver, or are you communicating as a salesperson who relies on a demo or a presentation to make you look knowledgeable and trustworthy? If nothing else, your work with the Easier Way to Sell will help you clarify who you're being when you're using this system. Let's move backwards for a second. What's your goal when you give a presentation or you do a demo? The simple answer is you want somebody to buy something. If they buy something, that will undoubtedly help you solve your problem. And that's certainly one way to sell. That's certainly the old-fashioned way to sell. With the Easier Way to Sell, you ditch your pitch and you ditch your demo. Now, for those of you listening for the first time, you're hearing a guy ask you to ditch your pitch. Be not afraid. You actually ditch neither your pitch nor your demo, but rather you alter their position in your communication. Imagine using your demonstration or your presentation as your close. Imagine only giving a presentation when your prospect has agreed that they will buy or not buy as soon as you've completed your precise communication. And this precise communication goes back to your job of giving your prospect only that information which they think they need to know from their point of view. This information helps them come to the conclusion that you can help them solve their problem. Your presentation or demonstration must focus on presenting them with solutions to the problems you've uncovered in your conversation. This is an elegant stress reducer. It's a stress reducer for both you and your prospect. Plus, it greases the wheels for the prospect to close the sale themselves. I think it's time for a little pause so I can let you know that as long as I'm able, I'm open to you sending in coaching requests. I may not do them on the podcast, but I'll certainly get back to you. Please contact me at ike@closethedealwithoutselling.com. Also, after our next segment, I want to make sure that you stay tuned for a great conversation with Lisa Gardner-Shaunamaloo. What she has to share with you will fit right into the tone of this episode, so enjoy. Steve, we're coming back. Okay, Steve, let's get back to your reluctance to have this authentic conversation before you give your presentation and demo. What I would like you to think about is that this conversation will help you qualify or disqualify your prospect as a candidate for your product or service. And when you're able to create that type of environment through your language, you'll always come out ahead of someone who attempts to convince and attempts to influence as the way to sell. I call this environment an authentic conversation. How much confidence do you have in the system and in yourself to just go in and have an authentic conversation with your prospect? For those just getting started in the Easier Way to Sell, that takes courage. I'll bet, and this is just a guess, that there's probably been a great deal of time between your truly authentic conversations. I mean, when was the last time you had an authentic conversation? And for our purposes, an authentic conversation could be described as one in which you are the interested party. Actually, you might think that you have authentic conversations all of the time, but that's not true. Most of your conversations are business related, and the rest are information seeking or conversations in passing. Most of us mostly have these passing conversations, and in technical terms, these passing conversations might be called chit-chat. For the purposes of sales, we're talking about authentic conversations in which you, as a problem solver, are committed to solving your prospects' problems. You'll receive valuable information when you practice the simple grace of asking a question and listening to the answer. But before we focus on the form and the format of your authentic conversation, you're going to have to address your authentic persona. In other words, who are you being as it relates to your conversation reluctance? Let's look at it this way. You arrive for your appointment. You're ready to enter the prospect meeting just like the system says. You go in empty-handed. No briefcase, no demo kit, nothing but a sheet of note-taking paper in your pocket or purse and a writing utensil. When you enter this or any type of significant conversation, who are you being? When you take on this system, you're making the choice to adjust your communication skills, and you have to move away from show and tell. How you communicate must reflect who you choose to be. You've been focused on what to say, but now you get that what you say is rarely as important as how and when you say it. And neither is as important as the skill of being a committed listener and an effective questioner. I'm coaching you to declare yourself a human capable of walking into a prospect meeting ready to have a conversation filled with significant honesty. In your action guide, there's a complete section entitled The Mindset for Success, and this section focuses on who you are being as a communicator and who you are being as a person. And does you use the guidelines of the easier way to sell to make things happen in life? Are you being one person at home? Are you being another at work and another around friends? Or are you who you say you want to be in every area of your life? Use the YES formula as your guide. The YES formula reminds you to remain curious, authentic, and neutral as you enter these conversations. All of the ingredients of the YES formula help you ditch your pitch and close more sales. Remember, the two main objectives of an authentic conversation in sales are: 1, your authentic conversation will uncover a no. You want your conversation to uncover a no that was going to happen anyway. You want it before it happens at a later and more frustrating time. Most of all, remember to uncover a no, not create one. And if you're going to get a no, when do you want it? Sooner or later? Number 2, your authentic conversation will help you discover if there's a fit between what you offer and what the prospect can use to solve their problem. And again, for you new listeners, the definition for problem that we use is a problem exists when there's a difference between what you have and what you want. That's it. A little more elegantly stated, a problem exists when there's a difference between your present state and your desired state. And I do love reminding you that this definition covers what I call a good problem. Here's an example of a good problem. Situation where there's a difference between someone's present state and their desired state. Here is what you might hear them say. My yacht is too small. That's a problem. When you have a small yacht and you want a bigger yacht, that's a problem. In this scenario, who will the problem solver be? A yacht salesperson, of course. So, as a problem solver, you get to discard the traditional convincing and influence model for selling and move into a diagnostic model. This model will help you decide quickly if your prospect is someone on whom you wish to spend your valuable time. In our model, the prospect must convince you that they need your offering. The prospect must convince you how they're going to pay for it, and, as you'll discover, they will. They'll do this because in your authentic conversation, you've uncovered the fact that the only way for your prospect to get from where they are to where they want to be is through the use of a product or service like yours. And remember, they're telling you why they need that product or service, not the other way around. You've heard me say episode after episode that when you say it, it's selling. When they say it, it's true. And my friends, the easier way to sell offers a bonus. Try this on. Since you never attempted to sell your prospect anything, they'll feel very positively towards you as a human being, and they will buy from you. By the way, this is how you close the deal without selling. But this conversation must be about what they want and what having what they want would do for their life. And the only way you can have that style of communication is by having a conversation in which you ask questions like a doctor would ask. You want to discover where specifically they can use your assistance. So, Steve, there will come a point when you're comfortable with the conversation part of the easier way to sell. And you may ask, how do I get to that point? Well, as the New York cabbie said when asked how do you get to Carnegie Hall, the cabbie replied, practice, practice, practice. So, for our conversation, you have to practice being who you are being. Be the person who has these types of authentic conversations. And the first thing you have to choose is, who is that person you're going to be? Your choice will determine how you approach conversations with your prospect, with your pharmacist, or with the world. Your communication is about producing desired outcomes for all parties, and your prospect will know that. Now, if you finish the do, be, have exercise from an earlier segment, you know that most of us approach life wondering what we have to do in order to be who we need to be in order to have what we want to have. If I only had more education, if I only had more money, more connections, those are the battle cries. Are you someone who believes you need more education in order to succeed? Well, here's the system approach. Declare yourself educated with room to grow. And what does an already educated person who chooses to have more education do? They take part in further education. This shift in mindset leaves very little room for, well, if I only had A or B or C, then I could have X, Y, and Z excuse. Who you are has these things. Expand on them. You must adjust who you're being so you can rid yourself of the concept that you need to have something like more education, like more money, or you have to give your demonstration in order to be successful. You need to declare who you are. Declaration's a powerful word, so powerful that I'd like you to add it to our list of words that we went over last episode, and that list includes courage, character, and commitment. The decision to be who you need to be in order to have what you want may not be as easy as I'm making it out to be. So you may want to talk to a coach, or you may want to read biographies of those people who you believe to be successful and people you respect. This should give you the idea of who to emulate and pattern yourself after. This should give you an idea of who you have to be in order to get what you say you want. Look through history for those who were challenged by straits similar to yours, be they good or bad. Learn how they took it upon themselves to be who they had to be so they could do what they had to do so they could have what they wanted to have. But I promise you that you can turn your have-do-be mentality around if you choose to live in a be-do-have world. This is backwards from the way most humans approach life. And remember, comfortability, the ability to feel comfortable in a given situation, will come later. Keep doing the work. So, review Section 5 in the Action Guide, and if you haven't already, complete the exercise called Your Personal Constitution. This exercise will help you clarify what's important to you and what's integral to who you are. This decision as to who you are being while you exist on this planet is momentous. Choose who you are going to be. Be it, do it, and have it. And a final shout out to Steve for requesting coaching. Being successful and still requesting coaching is what successful people do. Good on you. Get ready for a wonderful conversation with Lisa Gardner-Shaunamaloo. I'll just introduce her as Lisa. You'll find out all about her within the next few minutes.
I don't think there's a difference in enrollment in sales. I think when you can be authentic with what you're selling, authentically believe in what you're doing, and be true to who you are as a person, I'm automatically, as a consumer, going to want to buy from you.
Well, you can plainly see that our next guest and I think pretty much alike. Hello, Lisa.
Hello, Ike.
I'm so happy you're here. The reason I hesitated briefly on the name is there is Lisa Gardner. Now, that's a name everybody might say, okay, that fits. But Lisa Gardner-Shaunamaloo. Her husband is also a very good friend of mine, Balaji, and I've known both Lisa and Balaji for 25 years, and I couldn't be happier to have two people who are, I believe, communications geniuses as friends, and I'm very pleased to have Lisa here today with us. So once again, hello.
Thank you so much for having me. I was very honored you asked. And it's really funny because a lot of the stuff that you were talking about is like, oh, now I know why we're friends. We think a lot along the same ways.
Well, there you go. There you go. Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to do is just get the message out there to, just be a more effective communicator.
Yeah. So my husband and a lot of people always tease me because I am one of those people that I'm always in communication with people. And it doesn't matter if it's a friend I haven't talked to in 20 years. When I talk to them, it's like I talked to them yesterday and we're just catching each other up. Even though we're catching each other up on 20 years of events, it's like we're just talking like we spoke yesterday and we're catching each other up on the last 24 hours.
And what is it in the relationship between human beings that allows some people to do that and yet others go, I
think it's really the way you look at relationships. And for me, I don't care if you're the person in the elevator or my best friend from, 5th grade. I really truly believe that all people want to participate. Everyone wants to participate in life. And we all need that connection of each other to thrive in life. And so I have it's a 5-question rule. So anytime I meet somebody, whether they're in an elevator or a grocery store or wherever, I ask them 5 questions. And they're not set questions. Like I don't have a set of questions. I just, maybe I compliment them on what they're wearing if I like what they're wearing. Maybe I ask them how their day is, or if they have a child, how the age. I just ask 5 questions, consecutive questions of whatever, comes to my mind authentically. And I rarely, after 5 or 6 questions, I think that you get really like people don't want to talk if they're still not talking. But I've rarely ever had that happen. And people usually are engaged in a conversation with me. And I often have people just come up to me and tell me life stories of things that sometimes I'm like, why are you telling me this? I don't want to know.
Really? Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
It's like, too much information.
So when you look back on your life and your ability to, for lack of a better term, break the ice with other individuals, how far back do you see this in your communications growth? When did this all start for you that you remember?
I always was able to reach lines across people. That like I grew up in a family where there was a lot of alcoholism and a lot of kind of craziness. And I had a lot of uncles that were really rough around the edges. And all my cousins were terrified of them. And I wasn't. And when they were yelling and they were doing their crazy stuff, I would, like a little tiny 3-year-old, just be like, no, that's not me. That's you. And they'd be like, okay, Lisa, you can come and be with us. And so I just think that, I don't know, I just never had that. And as I got older, I did start to see see that there were things that maybe that I was a little different in communicating with people and relating. I call it even relating to people.
Relating, I like that.
That other people didn't have. Like one is my sister-in-law, who is very cynical, and she's very, she just is like a super doubter. And I love her to death. We have a great time. And she would be like, how do you just talk to people? And she has actually started taking on the 5-question rule and has had breakthroughs, which is great for her because she's a doctor too. So it helps her in her patient relationships.
Yeah. One of my friends, there I go, interrupting. First rule of communication. One of my friends and one of the people with whom I've had a conversation on the podcast is Dr. Mark Goulston. Mm-hmm. And one of his questions, and he has a hashtag for this, is what made you smile today?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And
that's a great question.
He's promoting that all over the world. And I thought that would be something that would fit right into the way you communicate. Hey, what made you smile today?
Yeah. And I think given in our world today too, we are so diverse, mm-hmm. And there's so much political craziness going on that people really, I find myself having a hard time and avoiding people that I really truly love because I know what their political conversations are. And I have to really, really ask myself, is that what I'm committed to for myself? And more importantly, for my children, because if they see me emulating that, that's what they're going to be doing as well. And that is not my goal. That is not what I want to leave for my children as a legacy.
Well, yay, Lisa. You are a pro at enrollment and being around and with people. That's this reporter's opinion.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. What advice can you give to our listeners about breaking out of the shell that you say, like your sister-in-law is in, of no, how do you do that? And she's made the breakthrough, and I acknowledge that. But I know how hard the slog is to get someone to go, I'm going to try that. What is your recommendation for people who really want to be a little more communicative?
There's a couple of different things. One is it doesn't happen overnight. So, one of my downfalls in life is I am a perfectionist. So I think everything has to be perfect all the time, which really, really, really gets me in trouble. It gets me in trouble with relationships and in life in general, because we can't be perfect. We're not humans. I mean, we're humans. We are humans, but we're not designed to be perfect all the time. And so let that go. And also take baby steps. You're not going to be, Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't Arnold Schwarzenegger overnight. It took him years to build up his physique to be, Mr. Universe. So I think we try something and we expect those same results overnight. That's not going to happen. Yeah. So if you want to be better in communication, pick one relationship. I recommend if you want to have it be a big, serious relationship, have it be a relationship that's already good and you all want to get to a different level. Don't take on, your mother you haven't spoken to in 20 years. That's just might tank,
You and I have been taught about inventing the future, and it's part of our DNA. And to try to explain that to someone, it's tough to create a future in which you find yourself communicating with other people naturally and effectively. So here's the question. What is authenticity?
What is authenticity? For me, it's honesty. It's just really looking truly in my heart and seeing what's truly there. Now, when I was younger, I think I thought I needed to be honest with everybody, which basically meant giving everyone my opinions, whether they wanted to hear it or not. I don't think that that's what honesty is anymore as I've gotten older. Sometimes, I have relationships with people that their political views are very, very different than mine. And I'm just going to use politics right now because it is a hot topic in our communities. And
It will
they're
be throughout time, I'm sure.
it will, and it's just like in flare up right now. So anyway, their political opinions are very different than mine, and their views on certain things are very different than mine. So I have to honestly ask myself, and some of them are family members. I have to honestly ask myself, what's true for me. So integrity is like a truth about yourself. So there are some things I don't need to talk to some people about, because to talk with them is just going to be a fight, or it's going to be an aggravation. So I think if you want to have a breakthrough in communication, sometimes the best policy is to just be quiet, and that's an honest way to be. And then there's a time to stand up for what you believe in. And you need to find for yourself, because I don't think there's a formula that works for everybody. I think you have to be authentic and honest, like true to yourself, what is working for you. I have friends that every day they are very, very vocal about their political views, and that is so 100% who they are. And I'm so happy that they're doing that, and I'm going to support them in whatever way I can. And for me, there are certain things that are just not authentic. And I have to find where I fit in and put myself into that, forwarding my causes. So I think that each person needs to find what their true self is, their authentic self. Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense. There's the other angle, though, where people are always looking for the role they're playing. And once they start to assume that role, the authenticity, diverges because they're not being who they are. And that's one thing about you that, now for over a quarter of a century, I've seen you're always you. You always get authentic Lisa. You may not be coming out and saying to people, how long have you had a problem with your breath? But
well, I don't know.
and you would frame it with a smile on your face, and that is your authentic you. And I see a lot of people that go through the communications process who are fighting to find that authentic self, and really end up being one person when they're at work, being another person when they're at home. And that to me is one of the challenges to authenticity, because people are attempting to find a role in life rather than just being themselves.
Yeah. I definitely, and I struggle with that sometimes too. It's I think, again, it's one of those things where we are so harsh and hard on ourselves as human beings. We need to give ourselves breaks. So if you do notice yourself doing that, and I know there's certain relationships I put on that role, and I become the person that I think they want me to be, or who I need to be to protect myself or whatever. And it is one of those things that, again, you take those baby steps and you do what you need to do to be authentically true to who you are. And it is an ever-growing process. It's not something where you get to the end of the road and you're like, woohoo, I've made it. You will be that way till the end of your days, when you know it's over and you've reached the finish line, when you take your last breath. That's it. So don't be hard on yourself. No, there's going to be great days, and there's going to be really like days where you just communicate and you hang up the phone from somebody and you're like, oh my God, you send that text and you're like, why did I do that? That was so stupid. And, then you have to give yourself a break. You're not stupid. You're just human. That's it.
Yeah. So your husband, Balaji, is originally from India, was born in India. Is that correct?
Yes. He came here when he was like 22.
Your wonderful marriage has gone on.
It'll be 20 years this year.
Yes. And it's just been wonderful. And I've been certainly, if not right there on the sidelines, watching this great relationship for all this time.
Huge part of our relationship. You're not on the sidelines. You're in the story.
Thank you. And somewhere in the middle of that relationship conversation, we got a message. Oh yeah, we're moving to India. And so Lisa and Balaji just picked up and moved to India, and they were in India, and I was having conversations with Lisa and Balaji about what it was like, and Balaji was talking about, well, I know this place, and Lisa was going, some pretty different stuff. So tell me, how did your communication style help or hinder you in India?
It actually helped. I do believe it helped. Because again, you have to be authentic with who you are, and that follows you in life. And so it doesn't matter where you are. I've been to Japan, China, a lot of other countries, and I am who I am. And so people will react to authenticity. They open up. They want to be included. And it goes back to my first rule. It's like people want to participate in life. Doesn't matter where you are. So, yeah. In fact, my husband, even though he had grown up in India, did not want to move to India. I had to enroll him into going to India. It was my idea. So,
I was going to let you say that. I wasn't going to say that.
Yeah, my husband was like, no. And I was like, no, let's do it. Our kids are young. It'll be awesome. It's a great opportunity. And so we did. And we lived in India for 8 years. Our kids were pretty much raised there. They're going through high school here in the States, which is great, but junior high and high school. But yeah, so I think just being able, I was very involved in the community. I have a lot of friends there, both international and because I think, and local, but I think that's one thing that people don't realize in America is that when you are an American and you travel or live overseas, you can do it one of two ways. You can keep yourself in a bubble and surround yourself with only the people that are like you. And this is for all expatriates that live around. So even if, you're coming from a foreign country to America, you can live in a bubble and not experience what America truly is. Or you can live in a foreign country, like I knew a lot of people in India, that they didn't go outside their bubble. And so they didn't really they experienced it as a tourist, but not as in the culture. And we did, we were full out, and I was involved with a lot of families and women that they lived India full out too. And when you're traveling overseas and you live overseas, you become part of an international community. So even though I was living in India, I have friends around the world. I can go to pretty much anywhere and have somebody's house to stay at. So my form of communication really was helpful in that I was able to really make some lifelong, they're not even really friends, they're family. And I know these are the people I can really, count on in life. So.
Well, I am just thinking for a moment about our listeners, and when they talk about creating relationships with prospects and clients, that I want them to be listening to you with, the same ears that our third and fourth grade teachers told us, listening ears, listen to Lisa. She's got good news. What did you learn in India about communication that even surprised you?
Okay, so what surprised me? It's important to know who you're talking to and their background, because every country has a way that they listen or speak from. So one thing that I learned a lot in India is that this is a perfect example. We kept trying to rent an apartment from this one location. And no matter what we did, they constantly told us it was booked. And now these are thousands of apartments in this place, and it had a grocery store and a restaurant and everything. It was like living in its own little city. And we thought it would be good for us. And we could not. I mean, out of thousands of apartments, there has to be at least one that's empty, right? We kept getting told no. And then his uncle was like, well, why can't you get an apartment there? And we're like, we don't know. And he said, oh, just 1 second. And he made a phone call. And within a half an hour, we had an appointment. And within 2 hours, we were signing our lease in this place. So in India, the conversation is it's a very dependent society. Like you need somebody, you depend on each other for your daily lives. As to where America is a very independent society. We do everything on our own. We enroll our children to live a life of their own. We do everything as an individual. Neither one of those cultures are right or wrong. They just have different ways of living. And so I think when I learned is that if you can find, whatever the listener is, what their backstory is, it's a different way of talking to them. I know with my husband, when he was there, one of the things he encountered is he would give people, he would say, okay, so we got to have X, Y, and Z done by the 5th. And they'd go, okay. And then the 5th would come and go and the work wouldn't be done. And he'd be like, dude, I told you this had to be done. And they said, yeah, but, or this needed to be done on that date, or this was due on that date. But he didn't get a confirmation and a promise from them. So it's a different way of working. Like you just didn't say this has to be done on X date. He really had to structure it in a way.
A structure for fulfillment. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's a different way of learning. I had to, in India, you have maids and drivers and things like that. And it was really funny because, I went in with an American way of thinking that I am going to have these, empower these people, and I'm going to do it like you do in America. And I'm going to have them working like how all these ways we would work with a maid in America. But when I got there, my maid, it's funny. And I hated doing this, but every 6 months I had to sit down with a pad with very strong writing and I would check off the list and like, you need to do this and you need to do that, and very stern, which is so not who I am.
Mm-mm.
And then she would relate to that. So, and over time it got less, but that was something she needed because that was part of the structure and the culture. So I think we have to learn, and I'm not saying be mean. I'm not saying I was mean to her. In fact, she was with me for 6.5 years and I adored her and loved her, and I still do.
You met her at her model of the universe in order to be an effective communicator.
Yes. And it was outside of my comfort zone. So I had to really, really get strong on that. But I also made a difference with her because when her daughter was having a play or some big event in her daughter's life, I would be like, no, you must go. That is important for your daughter. You must go. And for her, in her culture, you wouldn't take time off work as a maid to go do that. And I was like, nope, I'm not giving you a choice about this. You must do this. And so you learn to play the system or the cards that you're dealt. You learn to play it because ultimately it's a game of survival, but also it makes life easier too. And it is, like I said, it was out of my comfort zone in a lot of ways, but you learn to deal with it. You learn to incorporate it into your authenticity, I guess. You learn to make it real for you so that it's not like an integrity issue or burning in your soul.
Who are you being when you're being you?
Yes.
And that is a question that I ask a lot of the listeners when they go in and they're reluctant to use what I consider rapport pump priming, like you did with the maid, where where you can communicate once you meet them at their model of the universe, but then you can pull them into a different communication, one that's maybe less strident, less, like, no, you're going to see the event that your daughter is in. I realize that, but we've been together long enough. You can understand that this is the game I want to play. And learning to do that, I believe, is part of your enrollment gift. So here's another definition I'd like you to give, and then maybe a couple of examples. And that is, how does enrollment fit into our day-to-day approach to trying to get things done, whether it's a sale, whether it's getting someone who's doing work at your house to do it the way you want, because they want to do it that way for you?
Yeah. So I whether you're a stay-at-home mom or a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, you're enrolling people at least 5 or 6 times a day. You just are,
yes.
whether you know it or not. Your 3-year-old doesn't want to eat the spinach or the broccoli. You're enrolling them into doing it. And, a CEO, God knows that every time they turn around, they have something. Incorporating it into my daily life, I have 2 teenagers right now, so life is, a constant enrollment. Sometimes just for me to get myself out of bed, like, come on, Lisa, you can do it. You can do this today.
You're so human.
You can face those teenagers. And say the question again, Mike. I got distracted and sidetracked.
It was about enrollment, and you were talking about enrollment about your kids, and we ended up enrolling ourselves out of bed.
Out of bed. Because sometimes, you got to do that in life. Sometimes you have to face things that you don't want to. Like just a few weeks ago, my stepfather passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's hard during those times when you have sadness or you have just life-altering things that are happening, and you don't want to get up and do what you need to do. And sometimes it is important to enroll yourself into doing the basics, like brushing your teeth or, taking care of yourself or showering or whatever. And then we have to put on it, if we're parents or whatever, we have to put on a happy face for our kids. And, we can be authentic with them too, but you don't want to be wallowing in everything with your kids either, right? We know as parents that sometimes we just have to pull up the bootstraps.
Yeah.
So I think enrollment is at many different levels. We have enrollment with ourselves. We have enrollment just, with the people, like getting the mailman maybe to do what we want to do with our mail, or the grocery store clerk bagging our groceries. It's like enrollment happens around us every single day, whether we're aware of it or not. And I think when you can become conscious of what enrollment is, then there's an ownership of your life, that you don't have if you're not aware. So what enrollment really for me is awareness.
It's so interesting that you bring that up, because even while we were talking, I have a sheet in my action guide for the podcast that talks about, are these things sales? And it talks about getting your kid to do their homework, telling your significant other why it's really important that you get a new flat screen TV, and asking for a raise. And they all fall under the purview of selling.
Yeah.
As I'm listening to you, they all fall under the purview of enrollment. And if our quest to make people more effective communicators is successful, I believe those 2 domains will end up really complementing each other, rather than thinking of one as adversarial and one as just to be used when you're trying to get someone to join your club. The power of enrollment. Any book or anything that you've read about enrollment and authenticity that you'd like to share?
Well, 2 things. One, I don't believe sales and enrollment are separate. I really, truly believe that they're one and the same thing. And I think sales is like the dirty word of enrollment. But
I'm clapping, excuse me.
Yeah, I think that it gets a bad rap. But for me, it goes back to being true to yourself, because if somebody's trying to sell myself, like if I'm going into a car dealership and they're trying to sell me something and they're being a jerk, I'm not interested. I'm not, and I will walk away, and I will be very clear with them why I'm walking away. But if I know I need a new car and I just don't know which car I'm getting, and I go into a dealership and they're enrolling me into what's great about their car because they believe in their car, I'm more than likely to buy it. But if they try to tell me how I have to, or how my credit is a certain way, or this or that, or, like I'm not going to get a better deal, it's like, really? You don't think I can get a better deal? And I will literally walk out because I know I can. I know I can just out of sheer stubbornness, like work with somebody for 24 hours and get a better deal. I've done it before. So I don't think there's a difference in enrollment and sales. I think when you can be authentic with what you're selling, authentically believe in what you're doing, and be true to who you are as a person, I'm automatically as a consumer going to want to buy from you. So there's that.
You
And
just wrote my next episode, you know that.
Well, anything I can do to help you.
Well, that was very helpful. Let's see. Let me count. What were those bullet points? Let me bloviate on those.
So, and what was the other part of that question?
Any book that you've read that...
Oh, what book? Okay, so mine is not a sales book. It is Conversations with God. Oh. And I love that book, and that and Law of Attraction. Those two books, Law of Attraction by Esther Hicks, and the Conversations with God by Neil Walsh, I think.
Neil Donald Walsh. Those are two of my favorite books, and they're ones I constantly go back to because I just think there's truth in both of them. On a stack of Bibles or whatever you use to put your hand on and go, this is the truth. I'm sitting here holding Conversations with God, book 1, which is all dog-eared. I have old business cards from 20 years ago in it, and exactly what you said. It has nothing to do with religion. It's about how to live your life effectively and communicating with yourself and others. So thank you for saying that. Excellent.
Yeah. It's I'm telling you, it's just the greatest. Yeah. And I also want to say, like, this is because there's the 3 rules I live by in my life. And that's first one is everyone wants to participate. The second one is always try to be as honest as you can be. Know that you're not, we're going to tell lies as human beings. Just try not to, and we do it. Like my daughter's shorts disappeared in the washing machine. Don't know what happened to them. Right? We're going to have lies in life. That's just, just try not to be the big ones.
Kids, I don't know what's wrong with these kids today.
I don't know. But, and then my last thing in my rule of life is that it's all going to work out. We get in situations, I know in my life I've been in just places where it's like, oh my God, it can't get any worse than this. And then it does. So never ask yourself that question because it always will. But it always works out, and it doesn't always work out the way we want it to. But I'm telling you, every day after every situation, there is some happiness somewhere, and you just have to be willing and open for that happiness. And whether it's in sales or in life or, vacuuming your living room, there is happiness in it.
Wow. That was lovely. I was going to ask you to share one thing that you really think could make a difference in people's lives, and you shared 3. So consider that question asked and answered marvelously.
Thank you.
Lisa, this has been just a glorious time having a conversation with you. I always have a fun time, but being able to share this is making me even happier. And are there any projects or anything that you're working with that you want to tell our listeners about? Or is there any suggestions you have that, for them to do?
I just recently went back to school, and I'm 52 years old. And my ultimate goal is to get a PhD. And probably by the time I do that, I'm going to be, close to 60. And
my age,
to myself, exactly. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is crazy. But you know what? There's never any right or wrong time to do anything. Just take an action. Whether it's cleaning out your cupboards or going back to school or starting to paint for the first time. I don't care. Just take an action, something that gives you true joy and happiness in your life. Because the moment you do, you will just see a shift in your reality.
Yes, that was perfect. I will add nothing to that. Lisa, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for taking the time to visit with us here on the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast. The easier way to sell conversation is amplified by what you shared. The enrollment factor, the authenticity factor that you focused on, I think will be very helpful. And all I can do is for all of our listeners to say a collective thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I loved being here.
Take care.
You too.
I just love that lady, and I learn so much from her every time we talk. So once again, Lisa, thank you for coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure. Please tell your friends and colleagues about the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast and the effect that it's had on you. And if that's been positive, they'll probably want to listen too. This is Ike Krieger. See you next time.